1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Welcome back to the TMCJ podcast. We are on episode 80. Big 80. Another 10 down the line. That sounded better in my head.
Yeah. It's big, though. It's a big number.
It is. It's even bigger than 70.
No, what I mean is, like, when you say 79, it's like, wow, it's 79. But 80 is like...
Yeah. It's one of the reasons why, you know, when you see things in stores, they cost, like, something 99, because it looks like a smaller number.
Hate that.
Anyway, yeah, we've actually got a decently packed show. We've got a few topics. We have no idea if they're going to carry us for long or short, but we've got a lot of them. We may not get to all of them. For segment 2, though, we've got another book review. Blue has been pestering me to read this ever since he found out I had never read nor heard the radio play of it, War of the Worlds. So that'll be coming up for segment 3. But yeah, did I say segment 2 the first time? He's giving me a look.
That's why I put the fingers up.
God, I fucked up my fuck up. How did I do this?
Exactly.
Anyway, let's start off with the I mean, this is like, you know, shooting fish in a barrel, but we're going to start off with talking about Amazon's new Lord of the Rings series. It's something that they announced a while ago, and it was something that had a lot of potential. Because they weren't going to be following the books. What they were going to be doing was doing a prequel set 1,000 years before the books. So before the whole transitionary period that happens in the Lord of the Rings novels where... Before
The Hobbit or before...
before the main story. Well, The Hobbit was like, what, 50 or 60 years before the main 3 books?
Okay.
This was set like 1,000 years before that. And so...
Right.
They're basically going back to the point where the elves were in their heyday and there was all this other stuff going on in Middle-earth and everything like that. And there was some potential there. There was apparently going to be like a young Gandalf, and like there was going to be all this, other stuff.
Sexy Gandalf confirmed?
I wasn't really paying too much attention to it because, again, I really like the Lord of the Rings movies, and I only read the books after I had already seen the movies. But, it's a fairly seminal fantasy classic, so it'd be cool to see a series.
The Lord of the Rings has been popping up on my YouTube feed, but honestly the one video that I actually clicked on wasn't to do with that. It was talking about the friend relationship between Saruman, I can't remember the actor's real name, and the director. Yeah.
That is actually a really cool story. The guy that played Saruman, like he got his break playing like Dracula early on or something like that.
Yeah, I mean he was in Star Wars as a main villain, so.
Yeah, he was apparently pretty good friends with I think I don't know if he ever actually met Tolkien or if I'm getting them completely in the wrong age. No, that's completely wrong. But he knew either the director or somebody who was working in the Lord of the Rings movies, and so that's how he got the role. But the big controversy now that's coming out of this new Amazon Lord of the Rings series is that they have decided to do what a lot of modern TV shows tend to do, and they've decided to completely alter the lore to make it, I don't know, meet modern, modern political correct standards.
So what have they crossed? Because I haven't actually heard that much about this.
So first of all, they have female dwarves who are not only black but also bearded. No, beardless, I should say.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the big thing.
In the canon, the dwarves, men and women, all have beards.
Yeah,
and it's made a point of in the books that they're indistinguishable.
Yeah, I'm sure you remember me having a bit of a weird moment about the female dwarf in Terry Pratchett, like shaving her beard off.
Yeah.
I was like, it's a bit.
So there's that, and and in terms of like the ethnicity of the person they chose, like the problem is the original Lord of the Rings books, they were basically like a fantasy version of like England.
Yeah.
And so it there were actually areas of the Lord of the Rings world in the continent where there were people who were like of different skin tones, who were of different ethnicities. And I think they missed a huge opportunity here, because supposedly the lands to the south, which basically never get discussed in any of the actual proper Lord of the Rings books, like they could have actually done like a story about the interactions of those kingdoms with the rest of the other kingdoms, and you know how they interact.
Kind of like make a Game of Thrones out of Lord of the Rings.
Well, they wouldn't even have to make it a game of... Well, they could have, yeah, they could have done something like that.
Which I think would have been cool, by the way. I'm not dissing that point.
Yeah, that actually brings up a good point, because, you know, people always make a big hullabaloo about diversity in, you know, film and stuff these days. And I think not Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones did it correctly. They realized that in a medieval society, you don't have a huge amount of cross-pollination between massively different ethnic groups. And so what they did was they had kingdoms in different areas. They had a diverse cast, but they had a diverse cast that made sense within the lore. And they were like, oh, these people would have this skin tone because they're from this region, and these people would have this because they're from this region. And Lord of the Rings could have done that, because even in the original canon, like down in the southern regions, they had people of different ethnicities. And they could have shown how those kingdoms interacted with the other ones.
I don't think I have a massive problem with dwarves being ethnically diverse so much. The only thing that does slightly bother me is, by nature, dwarves should be spending their lives underground.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't really get that.
It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but again, it's a fantasy race, so sure, why not?
Maybe care that much about that one, to be honest.
The dwarves, again, why not? I mean, I can see why people are mad. Like, it's the same reason people got mad when the Twilight books came out, because there's an established lore for what vampires are like, and she made them into, like, you know, sparkly X-Men.
Although, I mean, Nosferatu and Dracula and all that, when they bit a woman, she would be in, like, ecstasy. So, I mean, sex isn't new to the vampire game.
It isn't, but the problem people had with the Twilight vampires was what they did was, like, there was an established lore for what vampires were, and then the author of those books were, like, was just like, oh, you know what? Now they're X-Men, and they sparkle in the sunlight instead of dying. And a lot of people who were horror fans, I remember I was actually on the opposite side of this when I was in college, because somebody was making that exact case that I just made to me, and I was like, who cares? They're not real. Just do what you want. But
yeah,
as I've gotten older and I've started to become
set in your ways.
No. I was going to say become invested in certain fandoms, like, for instance, Halo. There's a new Halo TV series coming out, and it looks awful.
Oh.
I take it back.
I want to see, like, a Halo series where it follows, like, one of the grunts. Just, like, the daily life of a grunt. I think that'd be hilarious.
I think there's, in one of the Halo novels, I think there is a chapter told from the perspective of Grunt. I remember reading that. God, I wish I could remember which one now, though. But that's kind of my point is, yeah. Anyway, that's not the only thing. They also changed a few of the elves, as I understand it. I know very little about...
Elrond's son is?
No, it's the Queen Elf. They basically...
Mithrandir? No.
I think maybe. I don't know. I don't know the lore nearly enough.
No, I know.
But as I understand it, the other thing people are getting pissed about is the fact that they took her from being kind of this, you know, regal and mystical kind of queen character and just made her default warrior princess number 967.
Yeah.
Which
does she have the old boob armor that, like, directs people's blades into their sternum?
I don't know. From the pictures I've seen, it looked like she's actually wearing the you know what the silver light armor looks like from Skyrim and Oblivion? Kind of looks like that if you can picture it. I think it might actually
just like a Cyberman's chest now a little bit.
Kind of, actually. That's pretty close to what it looks like.
Yeah.
So that's something that got people up in arms. I'm not too invested one way or the other. Like, I really liked the original Lord of the Rings, the movies. The books were pretty good, although
I think of all the movie and TV series franchises out there, I think Lord of the Rings has had an excellent stint.
yeah.
There aren't many. There's like the cartoon series, which was look just fucking weird. But then like Star Wars has got the Christmas episode thing where it was weird. No, and even in recent history with Lord of the Rings going into the Shadow of Mordor series, the story they made for that was so fucking good, people accepted it. With Cale, I won't say Cale Thas, but that's definitely not right. The person who forged the original rings for Sauron. He's got a badass name, I can't remember.
I wanted to say Kael'thas. We've been playing too much HOTS. So, one thing quickly, and I just remembered something that I was reading earlier in the week, and this is, I think, something that makes me think that this series is probably going to be a disappointment when compared to the original movies that came out. Even if we're not talking about the books, we're just talking about movies to TV show. The director, Peter Jackson, the guy who directed the original Lord of the Rings movies, he was quoted, when they started making those movies, that they made a pledge at the beginning that, no matter what, they weren't going to let their own, views on anything influence anything, and they were going to do their best to make it true to the original works.
Yep.
The new director was quoted as saying, we liked the original works, but we're going to be doing our best to make it reflect the modern world.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're a dumbass. That is the opposite of what you should be doing when you make a fantasy series. When you make a fantasy series, it's supposed to be a fantasy.
Well, if you want to... Sorry, go on.
No, if you want to make it something that reflects the modern world, you make like a true crime drama, or based on a true story, or like something with sci-fi, or... You don't take a fantasy series that's based on medieval England and try to make it look like the modern day. That's idiotic.
Well, not even that. Like, if you're going to do that, do it on an IP that isn't massively popular and famous already for being what it is.
True. Don't take something that's already very well established. If you want to take... Yeah. If you can...
Like, there are... It's one of those fan bases that are on, like, the top tier massive scale.
Well, it's been around forever.
Yeah.
I'm surprised Amazon greenlit this, considering what Disney went through when they redid Star Wars.
Just makes me sad thinking about it.
Yeah. But, I mean, that's what's happening. Again, I don't really have a horse in the race, but I think that they made a mistake going down this route. And I think which is sad, because I think...
Is it a TV series?
TV series, on Amazon.
Okay, so is it free to watch?
If you have Prime.
Okay, cool. I can watch it.
Yeah. So maybe when it comes out, I'll take a look too. Watch a couple episodes, see if it's as bad as it seems. Because honestly, if it's just a cosmetic difference, if they're just like, we're gonna make...
I can get past that as long as the story's good.
Exactly. I'm trying to think. There was a series that I watched a while back that I actually ended up liking.
I wonder if they'll explain the beard thing, because they did at least try and explain it away in Terry Pratchett. And I feel like that is the biggest part of the problem with the dwarves to me.
Is the beard thing?
Yeah, because it's like a quintessential
part of the dwarves.
Of them.
You know what? The funny thing is, I was playing through Thronebreaker. So I've beaten it before on the PC. It's a Witcher side story game, kind of like this strategy card game story based thing. It was along like $20 or $30 when it came out, and I beat it on the PC a few years back, and I got urged to replay it. Got it on the Xbox, and I'm in the part right now where you're in the dwarven city, and I have to help this dwarf, marry her sweetheart. And you know what? She got a little beard.
Only a little one?
It's a very effeminate beard.
How is she expecting to get a man with a little beard like that? That's all I'm saying.
To be fair, this is not Tolkien's world. Witcher this is Polish lore, so maybe their beards were different.
I'm just saying we would make fantastic dwarves. But yeah, so
me better than you. You're too tall to be a dwarf.
Wow.
All right. Other things. So this is more just keeping on the topic of news. Cyberpunk 2077.
Nudes.
Keeping on the topic of nudes, well, I have a topic for that too. No, keeping on the topic of news, Cyberpunk 2077 got its first really major update in a while.
Yeah.
Like, the last few big patch updates were just like, it was like, here's a 30 gigabyte patch, and we've fixed a bunch of problems that people were having.
Yeah.
I played through the game and never really encountered any game-breaking glitches. I would run into some things that were a little weird and stuff. It was nowhere near as bad as some people had it.
I hear now that you can change your nail polish.
I don't know if... Can you?
Apparently. Of all the things, I'm sure the game is not that optimized yet that they should be introducing that. But
it is. Well, the last time I played it, it was very, very stable. So I think they've stabilized the game to this at this point. Now they're working on actually patching in a ton of new content.
That's good.
So it was a 45 gigabyte patch on the PC, because I started downloading it before we did this podcast because I want it.
Yeah.
But they've added in like a reputation system for mercs. They added in the ability to ignore people who are calling you if you don't want to do their stupid quests. They added the ability to customize your apartment. They added a reason to go back to your apartment, meaning like if you sleep or shower or do things, you'll get bonuses when you go out to do a mission. They added in cosmetic modifications. So in your condo, yeah, you can change I don't know if nail polish is one of them. You can change your hair and stuff like that.
Yeah, I just checked the retail price at the moment on like Amazon for a PS4 game on Cyberpunk, and £19.
Yeah,
that's surprisingly good. If you're saying it's stable and they're adding more content to it, £19, yeah, is worth paying.
They are. I would probably recommend the PC version. I mean, the PS4, I've played it on the Xbox. I have the Xbox Series X, and I've played it on the PC, and I found both to be very stable.
But you do have a very powerful PC, to be fair.
I do, which is a thing to keep in mind. But the PS4 one is supposedly pretty good. It's getting a major update too, so it should be able to support 60 FPS, 2K. It's looking like they're actually going to keep patching it and keep supporting it, which is what I'm looking for. Oh, also major gameplay updates. They've enhanced the AI significantly, so the AI will react to the way you're doing things. They'll notice if you're like flanking them or something like that, and might change the strategy. NPCs react more naturally to if you're doing things out in public, like if you pull a gun in a crowd, people might actually decide to shoot back at you, or they might run away. Drivers might see you have a gun out and try to drive away. There's a lot of AI things that they've... I haven't gone through all of the patch notes, so these are just the highlights that I kind of pulled out.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. I kind of want to go back and give it a... I've been having the urge to play it again.
Is it kind of like Assassin's Creed, where they actively dissuade you from shooting civilians?
I mean, in the sense, the Grand Theft Auto sense, the police will come for you and fucking murk you. Keep in mind, this is Cyberpunk.
But they'll also murk you if you shoot one of the civilians that are shooting at you.
No. If the civilian shot you first, you're in the clear.
That's bullshit. They only drew a gun on you because you had a gun out in the crowd.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Oh, okay.
I meant if you were getting shot and you defended yourself in the game. But yeah, so supposedly a lot of AI tweaks. They're also doing a few graphical tweaks so that it runs smoother on older consoles and newer ones. Because apparently, I didn't know this. Apparently, like, they weren't fully utilizing the PS5 and Xbox Series X's hardware. Like, they basically made it to run on the old consoles, and then the new consoles were kind of running at half steam. So now they're going to be fully utilizing the new console's hardware. I don't know. I want to give it a playthrough again. I'm looking forward to it. I'm hoping... Oh, there's also a bunch of new DLC that they've added. Free DLC again.
Yeah.
I'm glad that they're doing that. Honestly, I'm looking forward to the first paid DLC. Because if The Witcher 3 is anything to judge by, their paid DLC for The Witcher 3... Like, they gave a bunch of free stuff on that too, but the paid DLC was like you were getting a whole nother game. Like, it was so good. So I'm hyped about that. I'm looking forward to
Yeah.
it.
Infamously, you played a lot of The Witcher. I could not get on with it. It
I'm
was just a bit
currently
too
I'm currently replaying The Witcher 3.
deep. Yeah.
And before we started this, I was telling Blue I've not beat but 100%ed Cyberpunk twice
Yeah.
already. Once when it first came out, and then once a few months later after it had been heavily patched.
To be fair, though, I kind of see Cyberpunk as being like a bit like Deus Ex. And I know over one summer I completed Deus Ex through to the end about 6 times.
Deus Ex is a lot more linear. Cyberpunk is closer to Grand Theft Auto, like a Deus Ex Grand Theft Auto, if that makes sense. A Deus Ex Witcher Grand Theft Auto.
I mean, Deus Ex was open world still.
To an extent.
Yeah.
It was open hub worlds. Because
Yeah.
like when you went to different areas, you had a new hub to go through and around. Cyberpunk, the whole world is open constantly.
Speaking of The Witcher, I finished season 2
Oh,
a while
nice.
back, and I forgot about it because it wasn't very good.
I only watched the first episode and I gave up.
Yeah. Are you okay with me spoiling some stuff?
Spoil the shit out of it. I think I've seen stuff online, so not really that.
All ye out there listening, you have been warned. Oh god, now I need to remember what actually happened.
Supposedly Ciri's in it a lot more.
So Jaskier, is that his name? The Bard?
Jaskier is what he's called in the original Polish. In the games, he's called Dandelion.
Right, they call him Jaskier in the series.
In the series, yeah, in the series they call him Jaskier.
He is just a piece of shit that does nothing. But he's in quite a few of the episodes.
That's kind of annoying, because he actually, even though he was a bit of a layabout and a bit of a womanizer, he actually was a decent character in the books and in the games.
I never got on with him. The lady, what's her name?
Yennefer?
Yennefer. She loses her magic. Is useless for about 4 episodes. Makes a really dodgy deal to give Ciri to a witch. Finally meets up with Geralt. But the whole time Geralt and Ciri have been roaming around. A monster will try and kill Ciri. Geralt will kill the monster. They do go to the home of the witches.
Yeah, Kaer Morhen.
A lot of this second series is spent in Kaer Morhen, where you meet all the other witches, including his mentor.
What's his name? I know his name. Fuck. Go on. I'll remember it.
And then, so Ciri wants to be a witcher. Her blood can turn other people into witches.
What?
Yeah. She's got elder blood, which
Oh my...
they want to replenish the stock of witches.
That's not what Elder Blood does.
I mean, apparently elder blood can also turn people into elves or something.
No. Oh my god, the people who wrote this show are fucking retarded.
I think this could best be me getting things wrong, but I'm pretty certain about the witch a bit. Anyway, so this witch... Yennefer meets Ciri and Geralt at a Buddhist temple thing. This other person who works for, I want to say, the Empire.
Nilfgaard, yeah.
Yeah. So stormtroopers walk into the mosque and try and take Ciri, but Yennefer takes Ciri and TPs them to some other place. Yennefer tries to take Ciri to the witch, but Geralt catches up. Ciri then goes with Jaskier to Kaer Morhen.
Kaer Morhen, yep.
There's so many dumb names in this. That's why it's taking me so long. My brain is processing all the
It's
a lot of
Polish.
dumb names. It's just, words I'm not used to. And then Geralt and Yennefer go to fight the witch, who is, I'm pretty fucking sure, based off of Baba Yaga, because they live in a house that walks around on big leg feet.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah,
Baba Yaga
it's pretty
being
cool.
a folk tale from
Yeah,
medieval Europe.
but called like the Death Witch or something in this. Some of the monoliths. The monolith that Ciri cracked with her voice at the beginning is spewing monsters. When Ciri's back at Kaer Morn with the Bard, the witch takes over her body, and Ciri then murders several witches in their sleep. And I wish you could see Kaiser's just viewpoint of this.
There,
He just looks like he's been drinking too much in 2 months.
how do I put this? I'm glad I didn't finish the second series
Yeah.
because can I go off on a riff on everything they got wrong?
Can I quickly finish it? Because it's
All
like
right,
the
all right,
last episode.
finish.
So Geralt goes back to Kaer Morn. The witches are all hunting down the witch Ciri, and the Ciri witch screams, cracks the tree in the tree in two, which I think it turns out to be one of the obelisks. I can't remember. I'm not entirely sure on that. And monsters start flooding through. She's literally summoning demons. But then Yennefer comes forward and slits her wrist, as in Yennefer's own wrist, which somehow draws the witch out of Ciri, but first somehow witch teleports Geralt, Yennefer, and Ciri to another dimension where the Wild Hunt is coming to pick up Ciri because they want to do their Wild Hunt things. And the witch flies off to the Wild Hunt, and then they all just go back to Kaer Morn.
Okay.
I think that's the end of the series.
So, few things. One, the Elder Blood thing.
Yeah.
It sounds like they basically read the spark notes of one of the books and then got confused and just made up their own shit. Because the whole idea of the Elder Blood is that somewhere back in Ciri's ancestry, there was this elf that was a very powerful person.
Mm.
The elves are often referred to as the elder race in the books. And she inherited from this extremely powerful line of elven, like, royalty, essentially, who have the power to manipulate space and time. Which is why Ciri can teleport and do other random crap like she did at the end of this, it sounds like. And it's also the reason the Wild Hunt want her. They want her because she has the Elder Blood. Mm. The Witchers have nothing to fucking do with that. Like the whole way that the Witchers were created was basically a human, not an elf, a random human, realized there's all these monsters running around in the world. Normal humans don't have a chance, and so through a combination of magic and alchemy and chemistry, they created these genetically, chemically augmented superhumans, the Witchers, who were designed basically to have the speed and reflexes and endurance to actually take on monsters. Ciri's blood ain't got jack shit to do with that.
Hmm.
They did train us, but they did train Ciri at Kaer Morhen, but the reason they trained Ciri at Kaer Morhen is basically the Witchers were like, well, we have this little girl. We have no idea how to raise a little girl. Well, let's train her to be a Witcher. That's basically all we know how to do.
That's sort of how it went, but when it actually came to... Because Ciri wanted to be a witch herself, so she was going to take this little potion made out of her own blood. And then Geralt was like, no, fuck you. Fuck the leader who wants this to happen. That's not happening, because you could die, and you'll have a child.
So something similar happens to that in the books, where I think Ciri wants to go through the process, and they don't want her to, and go on.
I completely forgot there's an entire... It spans most of the series, an entire part where the army of elves are a thing. But they kind of... their queen wants a child, because I guess that you can't have any more elves at the moment, for whatever reason.
So they explain in the books that elves live for an incredibly long period of time, but they're only fertile for a very short period of time. And so basically because their civilization is dying out, like none of the youth want to have kids anymore, and so by the time they realize, oh shit, this was a mistake, they're infertile. And so the elves are basically, just dying out. Their civilization is very close to being non-existent, and most of the elves that actually realize that's a problem are too old to have kids.
But yeah, so they go along with Nilfgaard for a long while, and then they manage to have a baby, and then the baby dies like a week after it's born, and then they get angry and leave, and it's just... It takes up a lot of screen time and nothing really happens.
There's some elements to that in the main stories too. Like the elves do fight to have their own kingdom. I think it's called like Don Blethia or something like that in the books. I may be butchering that name. Doesn't matter. The other thing that pissed me off in that description, Yennefer is basically in the books, like, because Yen can't have kids, like, her and Geralt basically become Ciri's surrogate mother and father. And so the idea that Yennefer would give her up for any reason at all, and that's fucking asinine.
Well, she does feel bad about it after she's been caught by Geralt.
Yeah, but that's bullshit. Like, it's like, oh yeah, I feel bad about selling my kid into slavery just because Dad caught me. Like, what? That's fucking stupid. Anyway, I mean, I've already said a million times, they fucked Yennefer's character from here until Sunday. They have completely screwed her up. She was an amazing character in the books, and they have fucking trashed her in this series. So I'm not surprised they continued that trend in season 2. All right. That being said, the whole thing with Ciri getting possessed and killing witchers, that's entirely a fabrication of the series, and it's
like 6 witches die.
It's weird because there's only like 5 witchers in existence in the books, and they're like the only ones left, and so they just made up more witchers for her to kill.
Well, every time I saw a witcher that didn't have more than a minute of screen time, I was like,
he gonna die
on the series hit list. I mean, 2 of them literally had their throats cut while they were sleeping. The boss almost did, and then Geralt walked in.
And I actually do believe that there is a point where Ciri's powers are being manipulated by a third party, but it's elves doing it, and I think it might actually be elves affiliated with the Wild Hunt, and not some kind of a witch or something like that.
Dark Eldar.
Yeah, the Dark Eldar. Now, I'm glad I didn't watch the series. Now, which is sad because I think a couple things like really made me hopeful for that series. One was the fact that they, like, not their choice in casting, but Henry Cavill. Like, he actually was like a huge nerd who played the Witcher games, read the books. Like, he was really into the lore. Like, he was a fan of the Witcher series. And I'm like, and they got him to play Geralt, and I'm like, that's a good sign. You got somebody who's actually passionate about the source material to play the main character.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and to be fair, the depictions of Geralt are spot on in the series.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I have no complaints about that.
I was watching a blooper reel video the other day, and there was one scene where Geralt was, like, knelt down by a river, looking at a plant in his hands, and in the background, his horse is taking a shit. And he doesn't realise it. So I was like, no, cut. He's like, oh, what's wrong with that? Horse is taking a shit.
Oh, man. Yeah, there's a lot of good, especially in the first season. And I imagine if I watched the second season, there'd be some good to it, too. Because Ciri and Geralt are 2 things in the first series, at least, I thought they got really, really right. Also, Queen Calanthe, Ciri's grandmother, they got her spot on as well. In the first series, Jaskier was pretty close to accurate. I don't know.
Yeah, the old characters feel very different in the second series. Just, like, in the first series, Yennefer spent the whole time saying she wanted a child. And series 2, she's literally giving up a child's life so she can get her magic back. And it's like...
And that's something I get. They have to do it differently for TV, but in the books, oh, excuse me, in the books, that's something that Yennefer keeps very, very close to herself, because all witches and sorcerers, like, chances are the process they have to go to become magic users, most of them become infertile, or if not most, a significant percentage do. In this, I've complained about this before, but in the series, they make it sound like Yennefer's unique, that she went through this. It's like, no, most of them go through that process. And so it was something that she kept as like a closely guarded thing to herself, is that she secretly was like, oh, I wish that I was able to have a kid. Which is why it's so, like, she's so passionately protective of Ciri along with Geralt. It's because both of them are infertile. And this is their surrogate.
Geralt infertile?
Yeah, witchers. As a part of their modification process, they...
Oh, yeah, of course they are.
They're sterilized by all the chemical stuff that they have to do.
Yeah.
And so, which is one of the reasons they're so protective of their surrogate daughter, Ciri. I don't know. Okay, well, thank you for that.
Nice. Saved you hours of your life.
Yeah, exactly. I got a lot of else. It's hours I don't have to spend watching that shit. What do you think? I got another topic that we can kind of wrap up on here.
Yeah, I'm good to go.
And then we'll move on to segment 3. Okay, so I will preface this right now that this is a topic that that not everyone is going to like. So if I start talking, you're like, oh, this is silly, skip ahead to segment 3, because then we're going to be talking about War of the Worlds, and that will be something worth listening to. I am a fan of visual novels, and I'm a fan of trashy content.
This sounds like a coming out speech.
No, when I say trashy content, I mean, like, I like cheesy romances, right? I like, shitty TV every now. Not always, but every now and again, I will get some entertainment out of watching it.
Yes, a guilty pleasure.
Exactly. There's a visual novel that I played recently, and they tend to have, even the trashy ones tend to have some semblance of interesting story, because there has to be some good writing in there to keep somebody occupied for the amount of time it would take to actually play through one of them. There's also, boobies. Yeah. Blues
it
making...
tends to keep most people's attentions fairly wrapped on visual novels most of the time. And
this is why I wanted to bring it up. Because, and maybe I'm just getting old, but I'm playing through it, and honestly, I was just like, I was actually getting really into the story, and I would get annoyed whenever the boobies came up, because I'm just like, whatever.
Oh, no, I'm totally the same. There have been a lot of games recently where it's been completely unnecessary for there to be, like, anything lewd happening at a time, and it just pulls you right out of the story.
Wait, that's the thing. I can't tell if I'm getting old or if I'm just getting jaded to, like, sexual content in games. Like, because the story actually was pretty good. It was set in this sort of kind of authoritarian communist state, and your grandfather is the head of... He's a war hero. And when he dies, he leaves you his estate, not to own.
He leaves you his Yu-Gi-Oh cards.
He leaves you his estate to manage. Right. And, of course, half the staff is beautiful women and stuff like that, exactly.
Pervy old grandpa.
But what I found interesting was, like, there was actually a decent plot behind the fact you have to deal with the secret police, there's government agents, there's there's a rebel organization that has your grandfather was secretly supporting and all this stuff. Like, there's actually, it's not a very complex story, but it was interesting enough that I found myself, it's like, oh, hey, it's a boob scene. Skip. I want to hear more about the story. I don't know. I wanted to get your thoughts on that. I'm glad that you already answered my question. Is that you were also getting kind of...
Yeah, I think when I was a young impressionable teenager who obviously didn't get enough, The those kind of things, yeah, they were fun in a game to break up the just constant fighting or something. But it's such unless you do it really well, like a proper romance novel, I guess, is laid out where you actually really give a shit about the person. And so even the slightest thing, whether it's just holding hands, means so much. But a lot of games these days just serve this shit up to you like it's, going off.
Yeah, and this is something I'll point out, and I will still call this one of the best visual novels of all time, Clanad. And this is 100% PG. There's not even there's zero nudity. There's not even any implied sex. It's a very, but because of how well it's written and because of how interesting some of the characters are, there's some like comedy bits, some slice of life stuff in there. But a few of the characters that you go down, like when you actually, follow some of the storylines, you end up caring about the characters enough that the emotional payoff for seeing the ending to those stories is way, way more valuable than, just like, hey, 2 clicks and some boobs.
Yeah, and with each game of that kind of nature that goes out there on Steam, another group of people have the bright idea that this is what people want, and so more games like that are made, and with less restrictions. There are some weird fucking Steam games out there. I don't think I've got a single visual novel or anything like that on my account, but it still suggests these kind of games, and it's like, I don't play these kind of games, but you're still selling them to me because I guess people are enjoying playing them.
Yeah, I don't know. Obviously I'm talking about it, so I've played a few of them. And what I've found is they're variable in quality. This one, I found the writing was actually decent, even though it was very blatantly, they were trying to get you in there for the boobies.
Yeah.
But, yeah, whatever.
It just kind of feels like a checklist thing, right? So, like, it's as necessary for the, what's the word, genre of games,
visual novel
genre, as like, a keep is to a castle these days. With the exception to the one that you just mentioned, every visual novel has some level of blushing princess.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Not all of them. There's a ton of them out there that are really good that don't.
Yeah. You just don't hear about them, I don't think.
Yeah, I played a lot of them. Like, Juan and I went through quite a bit of them in college, and a good chunk of them weren't pornographic. Or even, not even pornographic. They just didn't even have any sort of sexual content whatsoever. And they were good. They were actually really well written, and like I said, the emotional payoff to getting to the end of the story was actually really worth it. That being said, there were also some that had some limited sexual content, basically what you'd see in like an R-rated movie.
Yeah.
But they were still good. And those are the ones that you see like rated as being like, 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 masterpiece kind of quality.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So, if you want to see some of that, go and watch Max Gentleman's Sexy Business on the YouTube channel.
I forgot we played that game.
I hear there's some great photos of Santa on there.
Oh God, that was
heavily blurred for your convenience.
That was such a mistake. That was such a mistake to play that game.
That was such a weird idea I had. I was like, you know what? Let's just do something totally out of left field. We couldn't play it for very long.
No, I mean, I think Santa Claus was probably the end of that. Santa Claus.
Yeah, we peaked.
God. All right. You know what? Let's end it. Let's end it there, because I do not want to talk about that anymore.
Santa Claus peaking.
God.
Yes.
All right. This is going to be the end of segment 1 of the TMCJ podcast. Thank you all for listening, and you will hear us again momentarily for segment 3. Welcome back to the TMCJ podcast. We are on segment 3, our wild card segment, and this week, the wild card is a book.
That is.
A book that when Blue found out that I hadn't read it or heard the audio play version of it, War of the Worlds. A classic, which is a lot shorter than I realized it was.
A British classic.
Yeah. And one that also came out a lot earlier than I thought it did.
Yeah, same, actually.
I didn't realize it. Yeah, I didn't realize it was published in, like, it was just on the turn of the century. So it was like 1890 something. It was. When it So, and that kind of became a little bit more obvious reading through it, in just the attitudes of the protagonists and the people around them, and sort of the way it was written. I found. Yeah, I don't know. This was your choice for a book, so I don't know if you want to start off giving.
It was.
I don't know, just some background.
Country life in England hasn't changed much since then. So, War of the Worlds, yeah. So, one of the original kind of sci-fi stories, and a lot of the places are real places in England, which is just really cool when people use real world locations. In fact, I was talking to someone literally earlier today about the Terry Pratchett series, and the main city in that is actually twinned with a real world city, and they have a gathering there each year celebrating the series.
Yeah, which, although to be fair, you say it's always cool when they use real world places for stories and stuff like that. But on the other side of things, there was that trope that kind of got started with movies, and I don't know when this started, but it's kind of gone on forever, that the city that is like the most destroyed in all movies is New York.
Oh yeah, but that's that's when people are trying to cram in monuments. Generally, it is like the Statue of Liberty or the Eiffel Tower or something. It's more like a name drop than a good reason to be there.
Yeah,
these are like very out of their little villages.
Yeah, whereas this book, it starts in Woking, which I'm assuming is a small town in England somewhere.
That's not far from where I am.
Okay, well.
Yeah, the southwest.
But yeah, so for those that don't know, I mean, do you want me to go through plot synopsis?
Please do.
Do you want to go through it? All right. So I just finished this book literally today. I got it on audiobook and I liked it. I was liking it so much I actually bought the physical copy as well, so I could read through it. And I did one of those things where I was listening to it, and then I'd switch to reading for a little bit, just depending on what I was doing and what my hands were free. But the plot synopsis: the main character, whose name escapes me, George. He's a writer, a philosophy writer, and he lives in Woking, with his wife in the countryside. And a friend of his, an astronomer friend, is like looking up and they're observing Mars, and they see these flashes coming from the planet. And his friend is speculating about like, oh, could there be life there? Because keep in mind, when this was written, people had no idea what the atmospheres or anything was like on these other planets. They could see them, but in very low resolution. Yep. So for all they knew, Mars was teeming with life. It was just red. And same thing with Venus. They didn't know it was like a pressure cooker or things like that. So that, to me, was... I found that very fascinating, like seeing what people in the late 1800s thought could be going on these other worlds.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that they did note was that it was going... The flashes were happening on a regular schedule. So it didn't seem like a volcanic eruption, which some people did suggest it might have been. It
was done in such a measured way that they were precluding that it had to be something artificial. It had to be like either another being doing it or something mechanical or so on and so on. And as it turns out, I think it was like a day or so later or something like that, an impact happens near where he lives.
Well, just because it's a particularly significant line, which is kind of almost what the book is that people think of, is that when they're talking in the lab about the lights, he's like, the main character George says, the chances of anything coming from Mars are 1,000,000 to 1. And that's what, like, all the eve of war, the song is that particular line. It's very important.
Yeah. So the other thing is, I understand from what you've told me that there are, there's obviously a musical version of this with songs and things like that. I have not heard them. I that is something that I meant to do before we recorded this, but have not had the chance to yet. Anyway, so one of these, it turns out they are objects. Essentially, the Martians are firing these cylindrical, like, pods from Mars to Earth, and it's essentially their way of. So this is the 1800s mindset, imagining what an interstellar landing craft would be like literally a cannon firing them from one planet to another.
If anyone's aware of Warhammer 40k, it is almost exactly like a drop pod.
Yeah, they were lucky the Astartes didn't land there.
Can you imagine?
Would have been a lot. Yeah, but anyway, so thing lands and it becomes like this like scene of just like everyone is like curious as to what this is. They go down there and they see these big hot cylindrical like metallic capsules and they describe the Martians coming out of them. They're kind of like tentacly and
so this is
bulbous.
Something that as you know, I've read the Necronomicon as well, and I was like, this, he must have got this from H.P. Lovecraft's stories. No, if anything, it's the other way around, because it was a long time before H.P. Lovecraft wrote his stories. But yes, so they're described as about the size of a bear, very like robbery-looking grey, with lipless mouths.
I think at one point they say they have almost like beaks, almost.
Yeah,
I don't know
kind
if
of like
some
flappy,
kind of
I thought they were. I thought flaps.
Yeah, he describes some part of them as chitinous, and I couldn't remember if it was the mouth or something else. But go on.
But yeah, so bigger than humans, but not wildly so.
So that happens for a while, and it's kind of like just this curiosity. Like everyone's around there observing, like people from the local townships, and they're like, "Oh, the men from Mars are here," and they're all looking down. And I think at one point, so he runs off to like people are like curious about it for a while. They look at it for a bit, and then they kind of run off and go to do get lunch or something like that.
Very British. Afternoon tea, what?
Exactly. Oh, we'll come back and see the aliens later. It's time for tea. So they go off and do that, and I think they come back at some point because there's some, and they see that more like some stuff has changed in the pit, like they've constructed something out of that capsule that they had, or something like that.
I don't, because okay, so
am I skipping a
when
step?
the lid initially opens, the astronomers are approaching. So a party is elected to approach the cylinder with an offering of peace. So it's a bunch of like astronomers, specifically ones that don't have wives, because they said George is like, oh, but aren't you worried that you're going to look hostile going up as a group? And the astronomer responds with, don't worry, no one has ever been afraid of a group of astronomers. So all wifeless men approach with like beads and a white flag and that kind of stuff. Yeah, go on.
And I'm trying to remember, because something happens and they do end up turning hostile.
They're literally just approaching them across the common, and then the aliens stick a laser out the side of the ship, and
that's what it was. Yeah, they described it as like a heat ray or something like that. Some kind of a mirrored, and I loved it, like the what is it, the that kind of mentality of trying to explain it scientifically. Because this point in time, this was like right as I do. There's something I want to talk about really bad, but I think it's best talked about after we've gone through the whole plot. Because it's something for historical context, specifically historical context in Europe, and I feel like it feeds a lot into the way this book was written and the attitudes of a lot of the characters. But I like this character, he's trying to describe it scientifically, like he's speculating that it might be a series of mirrors or something like that, and it focuses the heat, and anyway, it completely vaporizes the people who are coming up to to greet the pod. And that causes a bit of like, you know, a row where people are like trying to get away, and then they realize that they start speculating, oh, but you know, it's kind of safe because the Martians can't get out of their pit because the difference in gravity between Mars and Earth, and they can't move that well. So he goes back home to like tell his wife about it or something like that.
No one in the town believes him.
Yeah, no one in the town, but people just think he's crazy. Yeah. And one guy tries to like lock him away till like that he can get like an insane asylum person to come by and grab him or something like that. And he eventually goes home and he tells his wife, and at that point he's calmed down,
Carrie.
And his wife believes him. And his wife actually gets a little like a little frantic about this whole thing, about people have been killed, like, oh god, and he has to calm her down. And I think one of the lines is specifically was something like, eventually I convinced her to take some wine and calm down. And it was just, I loved that's again the difference in mindset from that like more than 100 years makes.
Well,
but
a bit of
anyway,
wine could
so
calm me
that
down.
happens. Wine does calm a lot of people down. Chills people out. Anyway, so that happens, and I think
they go to bed.
They go to bed, and it's not till the next day that things start getting like really. Oh yeah, they have a nice dinner, and he comments during the dinner, because this is all written as if it was him putting together his memoirs about what happened to him during that time. And so he's like, this was the last, you know, quality meal that I would have for quite some time. And it's the next day when he wakes up and he's eager to know what happened, so he runs out and he gets a paper, and
the army started
he's
arriving.
reading about the army started arriving, and they just the way they describe it, because they described artillery, and when I started reading this I didn't know what era it was, so they were describing artillery, and I was thinking like World War I or World War II era artillery, but no, this is pre-1900s artillery, so this is like 2 wheels and a cannon pulled by a horse. So because I think I didn't realize it until they talked about how the artillery was thrown off by the horse getting killed at one point. Spoiler alert. But yeah, so the artillery starts getting there. The army I think it's some sappers, some army sappers who come over and talk to him, and they're trying to get all the information he knows about it. And he's describing what he saw. Yeah, sappers were basically an army engineer. Well, a sapper is what we would call an army engineer today. If I remember right, sappers were like that term dates back to like medieval times when they were the people who would find ways to dig under enemy castle walls and cause them to collapse and cause breaches. They were essentially army engineers from medieval times, and they were still using that term in the 1800s.
But yeah, there was like 3 of them, and they were joking around about how they were going to destroy the aliens. And one of them asks, he says, oh, so they don't have necks. Are we fighting octopus? And I was like, this feels very Lovecraftian.
Well, I think one of the guys is like, you know, he's like, oh, I say we just, you know, put up a shield and charge them, and the other guy's like, oh, you always say we should do that.
He wants to build trenches.
Yeah, he's like, oh, you always want to build trenches.
You must have been born a rabbit or something, yeah.
And the funny that is particularly ironic considering World War II was like, you know, 15 years away at this point, or World War I was 15 years away at this point, and that was all about trenches. That guy clearly got his way. Just a few decades later. Yeah, and so I think at that point he goes off and what does he do after that? He goes off and he does something in the town or goes back to the pit.
I want to say he stays in the house, but in the evening there's the sounds of battle.
Yeah, and then he wants to go back there for some reason.
He goes to he tells his wife, look, we need to get out of here now. I'm going to go and commandeer a horse-drawn cart so we can start moving our stuff out of this village. Which is why he then ends up going to the bar.
I actually so what you can't see that Blue can is I have the book in front of me and I just opened up to the it's the 4th chapter. The cylinder opens and that's when they start to. I think when that all starts to happen. But yeah, so basically he's going around and he hears the sound of battle, the sound of artillery being fired and all that stuff. And that's when he like decides, they have to leave. And so he goes to the bar, the local tavern, and asks that guy to borrow his horse cart.
Just before he actually gets in there, the heat ray hits the top of the church and the top of the mosque, and he realizes that his home is within the range of the alien's heat ray. Yeah.
Because they've now done something. I believe he actually sees them erect like this essentially giant tripod thing. Like they were thinking they were all safe because they would never get out of the pit. But then this thing gets larger and they build this construct that's then able to slice things away. And I think at one point, I loved the way that they were speculating as to the science of why this was happening. And it really does show like the kind of the infancy of science at where it was at that point. Because they're speculating that maybe, though the gravity was weaker on Mars, on Earth, the preponderance of oxygen has made their muscles stronger. And so they can move around with more vigor than they would on Mars.
Yeah, and the consensus was that the Martians were coming here because they were basically had dried up their own planet. Even though there's no evidence whatsoever for that being the case.
It's speculation. It is, it's all speculation, but it's interesting hearing the sort of speculation someone would have about what's going on out there in the universe from that 1800s perspective versus what somebody would imagine, say, like writing sci-fi in the 70s or in the... I just realized I have my window open, and I guarantee you people can hear those ducks on the recording. There's a duck right now. I'm so sorry for people listening to this story, but it's a nice day out. I'm leaving the window open to deal with the ducks. They're Martian ducks. They got a heat ray. They're forcing me to keep the window open. Anyway, so he gets the horse cart from the guy at the local tavern, and
pays a lot of money for it, like £2.
Yeah,
which is a lot.
Which at the time was a load of money. Yeah, £2 used to be worth a lot. I think they were saying like a new like buying a newspaper was like a pence, and that a threepence, and they were saying that was them gouging him for it because everyone wanted to hear the news. Anyway, so he gets the cart, brings it back, grabs his wife and servant, like the housemaid or whatever, and they all get in the cart and they ride off to somewhere nearby called Leatherhead, I believe.
George's 2 cousins were.
Yeah, and so he drops his wife and the servant off there, and he's like, I need to go back. And so he charges back. And there's in his internal monologue, there's a little bit of the reason he wants to go back is for the excitement. He doesn't want to miss out on this. He wants to... He at one point says something along the lines of, I felt once again like the same boyish urge to see cannon and gunshot and battle. And he doesn't say it exactly like, but that's essentially
he remembers feeling this kind of thing in his youth, and invigorates him to go back.
So all along the way, something happens, and the cart gets like tipped over or destroyed or something like that.
The tripods start walking towards him, and the horse, I think, bucks and breaks its neck or something.
Yeah, and he goes off... Yeah, they go off the road, and the horse breaks its neck, and he ends up sliding down the hill and, like, bruising his leg or something. And he has to make his very muddy and wet way back to his home, where I think he does manage to get back inside his house. And on his way there, he sees that the tavern guy is already dead.
Yeah. So he gets into his house, and goes up to his study, and that's when probably my favourite character appears.
The artilleryman?
Yep.
Yeah. So, he gets up to his study. And I think they do cut back and forth at this point a little bit. This might be the first time they cut away. He also has some perspective of what his brother is going through.
His brother is not in the radio version, as I call it, of the story. Because I think his brother stays with his wife, doesn't he?
No, that's his cousin. So his brother is the one who's in London.
Right. Yeah.
So his brother is some involved in some profession. I think he might be a doctor of some variety or something like that, and he lives in London. And so I think in the book they cut to his perspective a few times to give context to what it's like, miles away now in the big city. Like, people are starting to hear about it. They're excited. There are people coming in on trains, and his brother's like, every chance he gets, he's buying the morning paper, the evening paper. They're talking about people like he's getting a paper where the ink is still wet because people are so eager to hear the news, and the newspapers are eager to print
I remember reading about it in the original, and then when I got to the radio version, I was like, are we not missing a character? And I think what they did was a lot of the scenarios that he was in, they put Carrie in instead. So we shall see as we go. Because I've forgotten.
So, but that's really the summary of what the brother goes through. There's this fun little scenario where the brother ends up on the road, going away from London, trying to get out to the country to see what's going on. And he comes across like these two women being accosted on the road. And he goes to beat the shit out of one of the guys who's doing it, and the guy whacks him in the head with a stick. And it turns out one of the women, she had a pistol under her carriage seat, and takes it out and takes a shot at one of the guys. And between the three of them, they manage to chase off the guys. And he pairs up with them for a bit to kind of travel up, and because already, I think again the reason they cut to the brother is to show how even miles away from where this is happening, things are starting to break down a little bit.
Well, something they make quite apparent though is that London is so used to hearing shocking, awful news that a lot of the people inside of London don't give a hoot. And also, the papers, for the longest time, don't hear any actual truths from the military.
That's true, yeah. They're all, they do make a point that a lot of the information, they're like, the papers were printing X, Y, and Z, and this and that, and then the narrator, the person who's writing this from a future perspective, is like, of course, we now know that all of this information was false. And, I thought that I did like that little element of it.
Yeah.
That they kind of the author put the thought into going just that there would be this breakdown of information that even separated by a few dozen miles at that point in time, you would still have that breakdown of information. The trains going down, people trying to go here and there, people coming back to refugees.
Train these days, let alone back in when there's a fucking alien invasion happening. But yeah, so George meets the artilleryman crawling through his back garden.
Yeah, do you want to talk about this guy since he is your boy?
So the artilleryman, he was on the way to the front line to he was a driver. So then his horse and car, I can't remember how they got toppled. I think the horse might have spooked or something. It went over.
There was something ignited the ammunition. If I remember correctly. I can't remember if it was the aliens or if they hit a bump or something fell and the ammunition ignited, it blew up, and that spooked the horse and tipped the cart over. And
again, I don't know how... I can't remember the differences between the radio and the original book, even though I've read them both.
That bit is fresh. The book at least is fresh in my mind because I've read the entire thing in the last week or so. So,
so he suddenly he's made aware of the fact that the alien war machine that rose from the pit just decimated the troops. There was no fucking chance in hell that they were going to defeat this thing. And so he's crawling through the back garden of George's house, and George invites him in. They eat, and they make plans for where they're going to head next.
No, and not only that, I love the... So first of all, this is my thinking in modern day tropes. When he first so the guy's crawling through his yard and the man whispers out the window. My first thought was the artilleryman's going to shoot him.
Why would the artilleryman
he's going to get Well, just because maybe he gets spooked and comes around with a rifle, and just I'm thinking nerves or something like that. But that didn't happen. So he comes in, and the man's like, all right, come in here, calm down, have a glass of whiskey, here, have some food, and they just basically sit through the night and talking, and he talks about how the guy is just like kind of apoplectic with just rambling, and the way they wrote it in the story was, it's like, and these were the details that I could piece together from the ramblings of the artilleryman.
But yeah, so he makes a special point that they stock up on food and they eat properly before they head out. They make the plan that they will head back to Leatherhead so George can group up with Carrie, his wife, and the infantryman needs to get back to a military position so he's not counted as a deserter.
Yeah.
And so they set out in the morning, I believe.
They do. They wait until, I think they say that they talk or do something. They're like sharing a bottle of wine and some food like before they're heading out, and the imagery in this is very well done. Because the way he describes dawn coming about is, and slowly I was once again able to see the features of the artilleryman or something like that, because implying that the light is slowly coming back in the windows. So they head out, and I think he wants to head straight to Leatherhead, the main guy, George. And the artilleryman convinces him that would be suicide. So it's best to go all the way around, head north. And I can't remember if they head...
I think at one point they talk about the speed that the tripods move at, and I think it was something around 70 miles per hour, which for that time...
Yeah, for that time, it's really fast. Although they do talk about how like the tripods were starting to like shore up their position. Like there were, at this point, I think there were like 3 of them, and they were burning down some forests and then sort of just like basically creating a foothold, essentially.
Yes. I believe on the journey to Leatherhead was when the second capsule fell. I think it was once per day, right?
Yeah, it was something like that. I think the logic behind that, I'm assuming, was that the author was like, as the planet rotates, like so that it would be aligned once per day. Although, knowing what we know about physics now, that really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But, I'm just assuming that's what he was thinking. The other thing I like is I think on their journey they get to a town where you basically have 2 varieties of people. You have like military people standing at like parade rest. They've got their guns all laid out and everything like that. And you've got the locals who are being evacuated, and they're basically looking like they're going on a holiday. They're taking some of their more valuable things from their house. And I think the narrator George is speculating on like are
we talking about that one guy?
Which one?
The one guy with the prized petunias.
Yes, that guy. Yeah, just like as if that they're just going out for a holiday, or there might be the town will just be occupied for a little bit, and then they can come back later or something like that.
George is not happy
again. No, I think they go up and they talk to the soldiers, and they try to tell them exactly what they're going to be facing.
Well, the soldiers don't want to hear it because it's all about the Great British Empire stiff upper lip.
Yeah.
And so George is telling the civilian with his bowl of prized petunias that death is coming. And the soldier's like, you shut up, go away.
Shut up. Trying to keep a positive attitude here.
Suffice to say, the petunias get left.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that this all starts to get attacked at some point. Like as they're leaving this area, like they do get attacked, and I think they dive into the water, or George dives into the water because he knows it's like a heat ray, and he's assuming the water will
protect. Which I thought is the dumbest thing you could do, personally.
I mean, it's better than if it hits him dead on.
Anyway.
It's gonna exactly. So the water, at least, maybe he gets singed and scorched, maybe a little boiled, but he doesn't get disintegrated.
I mean, it was turning the water to steam on impact.
Yeah, that's again. I think they do make a point of how, like, at the end of this, like, pretty much everyone is, like, burnt and blackened and dehydrated and, like, emaciated.
So they several other people jump into the river. The artilleryman splits in a different direction. When George is in the water, the tripods are, like, standing over them, picking some of them out of the water, I think. And then an artillery shell rots from a local hill and hits one of the tripod dead on.
Yeah. It hits it dead on, and it's implied that it kills whatever was driving the thing, and it starts to gyrate madly before it just collapses and falls over. And that was the point, like, everyone around is cheering, and there's this moment
No, there's no cheering. No,
like, oh.
I don't think anyone's cheering. I could be wrong.
There's, I think, when it hits, I think the people around him give it a cheer.
I'm thinking of the other water-based thing, which you know about.
No, that's later.
Amazing. But yeah, so George just barely scrambles out of the water, like, which is basic. It's almost boiling, they describe it as. And so he's incredibly burnt, and he looks up, and there are the other two tripod are standing over him, and he's like, I'm fucked. This is it. And then what he perceives as a miracle, but in the brains of the aliens, it's a tactical move. They don't fire at him. They just scoop up the remains of their fallen tripod, and they retreat back across the countryside, never thinking that these ants had anything that could even touch them.
Yeah. Like, multiple times he speculates whether, like, how these Martians see them. Like, are they more evolved? Do they think of us in the same way we think of a cloud of angry bees when we swat a nest? He was speculating, do they perceive us as intelligent creatures on a par with them, or do they see us as just, like, you know, something acting upon its nature when they've disturbed its nest?
This is not a war. This is a cull.
Yeah, like they're just trying to. I think, like, you know, they're laying the foundation for a home, and they don't care that they've stomped on an anthill or torn it up or something like that. There's a lot of speculation on that, and again, it's something that I'll save for my bit of a talk on the end from, like, the historical context, because there's a lot that can be said about the mindset of the time in the way this was written and the way the characters think, act, and talk.
Yep.
And I always find that stuff very interesting. Anyway, so that happens, and I think at this point does he end up on that boat with the dude yet?
No, so this is the point where boat with the dude.
The dude that just, like, it goes off rambling and praying.
Sort of. I don't remember there being a boat there, though. It could be in the original one and not in the radio version.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember now.
He's found by... The word's not priest. What's the word?
I can't remember. They used a word. I actually didn't know the word. I'm usually quite proud of my vocabulary, but I didn't know the word he was using.
Well, until we find it. He is found by a priest after he's, like, limped away a little bit. He collapses, passes out, and he comes to with this priest standing over him.
Deathly thirsty, just going, like, you know, water, and the guy's like, you've asked for water every time that you've woken, or something like that.
And the priest is... I want to know more about the priest, because I'm sure it fleshes it out more in the book, but there's kind of mixed messages in the radio version. Like, I understand all the events that happened to him, just not the chronological order in which they happened. Because this priest has a wife, or had a wife, called Beth. And when the aliens emerged, he saw this as a...
Angels of Death, I think he calls them at one point, coming down. And...
This is an equivalent of the Great Flood. And that God is wiping away the sins of humanity. And he even says he thinks that his own wife, Beth, is a demon sent by Satan. And then Beth tries to rescue his holy Bible given to him by his uncle, and it's been passed down through like 4 generations. Goes into this church to get the Bible. The church collapses and kills Beth. And the pastor like sinks to his knees and is saying, "Why have you taken one of your own, Satan?" Like, he's really confused, really fucked up in the head, and his wife just died in front of him, trying to save his own religion.
It's pretty much like, it's implied through a lot of this.
I think Nathaniel's his name.
A lot of the interactions with this guy, like as it goes on, it's very clear that this guy has just like, he's snapped. Like, and he's just like, he's basically, his sanity has been completely fragmented to the point where now he's just wildly gripping at any sort of explanation, for any reasonable explanation for what's happening around him. And it's interesting. He's one of the few characters that does seem to like outright break and panic. Like there's a decent amount, and I have some thoughts on why that is, but he seems to be one of the few characters that actually do like completely.
Yeah,
snap.
which is ironic because it's something that's mentioned several times in different ways, is that you know that shit's really got real when even the clergy and the priests are renouncing God, essentially.
Yeah, God, I wish I could remember what the hell he was called, because it wasn't a priest.
No, honestly, it was like Proctor or something.
Proctor, that actually sounds right. And I don't know if he was actually... Yeah, but either way, who he is isn't necessarily as important as the interaction that these two have. I think at one point they managed to finally... Parson, thank you.
Yeah, go on.
I'm sorry. What's that Christmas song? In the meadow we can build a snowman, and we can pretend he is Parson Brown.
This is Parson.
That was what. I know. This is the only, but that's the only other time I've heard that word before, is Parson. Okay.
Actually, maybe his last name's Brown. Who knows? Sorry.
They managed to get to a house, I believe. At some point.
Make it to a house.
And in that house, they're going around trying to find like food, and they do find some food and things, and I believe they find some provisions. They don't ever mention water. The provisions they find is like they find food and they find Burgundy wine.
Well, I don't think they even find the wine at first. Somehow the priest later finds the wine, and George is like, "How the fuck did you get this?"
Yeah. So, but what happens? They get to this house, and while they're in the house, like it collapses because another capsule hits nearby and like crushes.
They
the building.
say it lands on the house.
Yeah.
I'm like, how the hell is that? How what? Physics?
So it partially collapses, and they end up like basically holed up in the rubble of this house, not wanting to go out,
in the
kind
coal
of
cellar.
daring to. They actually say in the book, and I love the. Again, this is the narrator's like adventurous spirit here, like risking death and dismemberment. They're crawling out to just to see. There's no reason that they want to see, but they're curious enough that they want to get to the edge and see what these Martians are doing.
And they learn a lot about the Martians.
Yeah, I think don't they find like a dead one, and they...
So they see for a start that in fact they are still really struggling with the gravity. And it's actually weird to George how the actual aliens look like broken tools, whereas the machines the Martians make look far more lifelike to him.
Yeah. And one of the things they speculate on, I really thought this was cool, was because this was like right as the philosophy of eugenics was starting to like pick up. Like it didn't reach its peak until the 20s, I want to say, but the idea of like, you know, genetics and of like, you know, scientifically, you know, observing the world was really starting to pick up around this time. And so he references like a paper of, you know, somebody who had speculated that eventually, you know, when human beings, their hands would continue to grow and become more dexterous and more prominent, and they would lose musculature and lose hair and all the other things as chemistry and technology augmented us. It would be brains and the ability to manipulate machinery would be it. And so he speculates these Martians have reached that state where they're just a head, a mouth, and different tentacles and hands to manipulate things.
Two things. One, something that's actually mentioned at the end, but it's not a spoiler, is they're talking about the aliens. Say the true threat from the aliens, despite them being bigger than a human, wasn't in any way their physical capabilities. It was purely their minds.
Yeah.
Go on.
And the thing he says at that point is like he speculated why they were all like naked, and then he realized he came to the conclusion that they changed bodies like we change clothes. Like the aliens would sit inside of the tripod, or the alien would sit inside of this other machine, or he would sit inside, and they would essentially just get inside whatever mechanical apparatus. They would choose their body to the purpose they needed to do, whereas we would choose the outfit for whatever we needed to do.
They were, in some ways, just walking brains, which would put themselves into something and make it work. Which also led to interesting eating habits they found out about now.
You want to talk about that? Because I actually don't remember too much about that.
So it was at this point that the modification to the tripods was noticed that some of them had like large baskets and they were collecting humans.
Oh, right.
And the parson was like, oh, how lucky for them. They're not going to be murdered. And then those people were being brought back to, let's say, a
processing plant.
Good choice of words. And then the aliens were taking rather than eating people, the more efficient way of doing things that was best for them, that didn't use energy and it just gave them the pure nutrients, was that they were taking all the blood from humans and then injecting it directly into their veins.
Yeah. Exsanguinating them is the technical term.
Which, if you're smart, that's the point where you work out how the book's going to end.
So that happens, and basically they hole up in this house for quite a while. I think it's something like 14 days.
And they're driving each other crazy.
Exactly, because the parson is a bit of a dumbass. Like, he has no... It's made clear that he has no self-control. He's like, you know, whatever, I'm gonna ramble and rant to myself. I'm gonna eat all the food. I'm not gonna ration anything. Oh, look, we found a bottle of wine. I'm gonna drink this whole thing right now. And, like, he does that repeatedly. And to the point where I think the way the narrator describes it, George, he goes like, it's like, I tried first to win him over with persuasion and argument, then with threats, and finally with force. And basically he just beats the shit out of him because he keeps eating all their food.
And the day when he beats the shit out of him the worst, he knocks the priest out. No, he actually pulls a knife, and he's like, if you don't shut the fuck up, because the priest is saying, Lord, forgive me, I've done these things.
He's shouting it. They're trying to be stealthy, and he's shouting.
And so George is like, if you don't be quiet, I'm going to stab you. And they get into a fight. George ends up stabbing the pastor, parson. And the priest goes unconscious. Not dead, unconscious.
Yeah.
But then...
It's enough of a blow to, like, knock him down. And then the aliens, having heard this noise, and George hides,
pulls him into the coal cellar.
They come in, and George doesn't see this, but he describes hearing the sound of something very heavy being dragged from the room. And so they come in and they grab the parson. And so I think he stays in there for a while longer, goes a little bit delirious from hunger and thirst, barely managing to subsist on what was left.
The red weed.
The red weed. Well, they do talk about that.
'Cause it covers the peephole at one point.
So basically, some of the Martians apparently brought seeds and plants with them as well. The most prevalent one, I think they talk about how only one of them really ever took over
Really
and actually
swept,
managed to
yeah.
spread. And that was the red weed, which they describe it as like basically like I think it's just ragweed, but red. And I think the implication here is that, again, the author speculating on what plant life would be like on Mars that would give it that red appearance. Like, oh, the plants must also be red. Which, again, I love the imagination of the time. So eventually he manages to come out.
He hears a
bit delirious.
dog barking. And he's like, oh shit, dog, you need to be quiet.
And he speculates on two things. One, oh god, the dog is going to give me away. Or two, maybe I can lure the dog in here and kill it and eat it. Which, again, he's been in there for 2 weeks at this point. Just delirious under the ground, thirsty, hungry, and mildly insane from isolation.
And
but
guilt.
he goes out and and guilt, yeah. He goes out and he finds that they're gone. Like the whatever Martian apparatus was around is gone now. And so he goes off wandering, again, trying to continue his journey where he needs to go. I think he finds like a pump with some water to finally revitalize him a little bit. But he's making like really shit progress because he's so emaciated and weak from his long encampment in the ruined house. He makes it to London.
No.
If I remember right. Does he stop somewhere before London?
He sees a figure crouching in a woodland area.
I said the woodland area. Okay. For some reason I thought he was going to London. All right. Doesn't matter. And the figure, if I remember right, is this our favorite character? Yeah, okay. This is the part I thought it was. So the figure challenges him and tells him, to hold where he is, and he's like, okay, things have already kind of degraded, like this guy doesn't want me near him.
So this is my territory, there's no food here.
Yeah, and then they recognize each other, and it's the artilleryman from earlier.
And the artilleryman says, I thought you drowned, and the other guy said, I thought you burned.
And then they both like speculate on how lucky they each are and everything like that. They have a little bit of a heart to heart. And the artilleryman goes through his plan for the future.
This is my favorite song.
Which okay, well I actually want to hear this song now because honestly the plan itself is kind of interesting. So he's speculating that the Martians will essentially treat humans like cattle or like animals, and that the ones that cooperate and the ones that deal with them and don't challenge them, they'll be essentially left alone to either roam the wilds or to maybe be pets or something like that. And he's thinking that the best plan is to have like an underground where people stay and they preserve their knowledge and they keep the free human race going in these underground communities secret from the Martians.
They return to an original savage-like state where only the strong are allowed in, and go.
But he separates that from the savage ones because the savage ones are just going to go out there and essentially become tribal. But the ones in his community, they keep only the strong, so that but for two reasons: the strong will so they will eventually be able to defeat the Martians, and B, so that they also want to maintain and preserve as much knowledge as possible. So not just the physically strong, but also the mentally adept. They want them all in those communities to try and.
But not only that rubbish like poetry, as he says, real things like science, and he says, we need the important things like, what was it? Schools, prisons, and something else. Libraries, I think.
Yeah,
and we'll play each other at cricket. Very British.
Yeah, and so they have this long like diatribe, and the main character is like George is won over by this long diatribe, and so he brings him into his area there and finds out they've got some he's got some limited provisions. including some champagne and cigars, which they indulge in.
Well, the first... Because they don't get the champagne and cigars till after the first bit of digging.
Oh yeah, that's true. He's planning to dig a tunnel or to dig like an underground bunker
to the
or
local
something
sewer
like that.
system, and that's where they'd start. But when George sees the hole that he had made, so it took him a week to dig a hole of 10 feet long, which George says he could do in a day in his head. And that's the first moment where he really thought the difference between the artilleryman's dreams and reality, that was the real distance between them.
Yeah. Especially because the artilleryman multiple times like, oh, we need to take a break. You know, you got to take a break from work. Can't work all the time. And then George starts to piece it together, like how much the guy in his original speech was emphasizing that we don't make them mad. We just hide in the hole and wait. And he realizes the guy's just... He's coping in his own way.
Yeah.
And so after they have their champagne and cigars, and I think it's while he's smoking a cigar on the roof... They do play chess, that's true. And George beats him handily 3 times.
Yeah, well, he was surprised by that, to be honest.
I think in the book, they say after 3... They actually say that the artilleryman put up a good fight, but they won all 3 games. But after the chess game and everything, George is on the roof smoking a cigar, or finishing one of the cigars they had, and he's... thinking to himself and realizing he resolves to himself that he can't stay with this guy.
He sees the flashes in
he's
the
got to
distance
go find his...
beyond the hill.
Yeah, and he's like, I've got to go find my wife. Like, I'm not gonna be caught up in this pipe dream.
He also, because we've kind of skipped over. We need to go back a bit to talk about Carrie's journey and brother.
So they don't talk too much about Carrie in the book.
Yeah. John, should we go with do you remember the brother storyline pretty well? Or should I do the Carrie storyline?
Go for the Carrie storyline. Okay. The brother, I already told the bulk of what I remember of the brother storyline. Him meeting up with the pair of women on the road, them having the issue with the encounter there.
So, Carrie, Carrie's at Leatherhead, left when George went back to working, or whatever it was. And a soldier comes by the house and he says, "We're evacuating the village. Everyone's got to leave. Their tripods are coming." So she tries to persuade George's cousins to get on the train with her, but they won't go. So she gets on the train and goes along to the next village, I think. At some point, she gets on the road towards London and she sees 2 women being harassed for their cart by a guy. And she joins
This
them.
is literally the brothers' storyline, but they just replace it with Carrie.
On this...
So, and it's the opposite direction, because she's coming from Leatherhead, he's coming from London. And that
was a little bit loud. On the road to London, people are getting, like, trampled. That's the thing that happens throughout this. Quite a few people get trampled.
Yeah, I completely forgot about this. They get to, like, a crossing, right? And there's a bunch of people all going around. There's carts that won't move. And I think in the book, it's the brother, and he tells the woman with the revolver, like, if the guy behind us starts trying to run us off the road, point your gun at his horse.
Yeah. No. First he says, point the gun at the driver, and he says, no, point the gun at the horse, because that's more valuable and freaks him out more.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a boring trek, in my opinion. But, whatever.
It serves to add context to what was going on outside of the purview of George.
And they get fairly near London, and then they're stopped by a couple of guys, and the narration beforehand is law has completely broken down, the military has kind of disbanded, there's even a few submarines that were meant to be helping which just disbanded. What's the word? Revolted. You know what I mean. Mutinied.
Yeah.
And the new show of force in the country was like the farmers, because the farmers had shotguns.
Hell yeah.
And so the 3 ladies were going towards London. They're almost there. They're on their horse and cart. And a couple of guys stopped them and they said, right, this horse belongs to us
Don't they
now.
requisition it?
We are the Westborough Council representatives. We've got shotguns. This is ours now. If you're really good, you can have a bowl of horse stew. Otherwise, get out of here. So they just leave because there's not much they can do in that situation.
Yeah.
And eventually they make it to London. Do you know what happens from there?
So no, because it's the reverse
Oh, okay.
of what happens in the book. Because they're going away from London in the book.
So they get to London.
And in fact, in the book, I believe they're actually trying to get out of the country.
Yeah.
They're like, I think in the book they were going to Essex or somewhere, and they were going to go from there to try and like leave the country for the
So
continent.
they get to London, and then they go to the place where that they can leave the country.
Yeah. So it's the same in the book. They're going in a different direction.
So Carrie gets into London, and all the people in London are super chill about everything that's going on still. Even though, like, the one worrying thing is that every so often these weird brown blobs are floating down the Thames.
Yes. Yeah, I remember
Which
this.
is essentially the mutated corpses of people further upstream, I'm assuming. And because there are so many people coming to London from the rest of the country who are evacuating, she said there's... it's strange to see poor people walking around the streets with very rich people who are also looking muddied and dirty, and it's like nothing she had ever seen before. She got absolutely shilled for a room for the night because there's very little places to stay.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, whenever refugees coming in from all over the countryside, where are they going to stay? It's already a huge, well-occupied city.
So she got an attic room, and in the morning, the sirens were blaring. People were panicking. There were smashed windows everywhere. She actually grabs a bike from out of a shop window that's smashed with a punctured tire. Go on.
This happens in reverse. So this is how the brother gets out of London. Is he he loots a bicycle from a shop, and he gets it out, but only with a punctured tire.
Yeah.
It's interesting how they've used the same elements, but they've kind of reorganized
And how she
them.
managed to cycle with a punctured tire, I don't fucking know. It's easier to walk than cycle with a punctured tire, in my opinion.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the bike. I've done it before. It's difficult, but it's still faster than walking.
And so she gets to the river, and there are boats that are absolutely full to bursting. She just about manages to get a place as the ferry sets off. No, wait, the ferry hasn't set off yet. They're trying to squeeze as many people on as they can, and then the tripods
Yeah, I
appear
remember this.
in the horizon, and everyone's like, "Shit,
'cause I think
go on."
they make a point in the book about how it was the captain was loading people on essentially until there was not a single space left to stand on the deck.
Yeah, so they saw the tripods, and everyone was like, "Just gotta leave now or never."
Yeah. Yeah.
Which led to probably the greatest battle. I don't know, at least in the musical form, it's so epic. I don't know how it went down, but I'd like to hear the book version of this.
I mean, the book version of the battle is actually fairly
it's very swift.
bare bones.
But, yeah.
Well, in the book, it is. It's very swift. It's very bare bones. It's just, the things come over. They start, shredding stuff with the lasers. There's, like, some kind of a gas that they put out. And
Poison gas.
yeah, they use poison gas. They use the heat beams. People are, getting slaughtered. They take down some buildings. And it's all over very quickly. I honestly don't remember too much about it from...
So, the ferry
from the audiobook.
is making its way out, and in the harbour is an ironclad called the Thunderchild.
Yeah.
Which puts itself between the tripods and the ferry. And so the tripods start going into the water, trying to cut off the ferry. And the ironclad turns about and steams full force at one of them. Specifically not firing their guns, I think it says in the book. Because if they're firing the guns, then the tripods would have seen it as an imminent threat and just blasted it.
and attack them. Instead, they go for the ram.
But instead, so the tripods fire a gas canister of the black smoke.
Oh yeah, this is something that we kind of glossed over earlier. The chemical weapons they use, they do talk about this earlier when the artillery is attacking the tripods. They mention that the tripods, what they do is they fire these canisters out towards where there could potentially be artillery, and they don't explode, they just smash and release a gas cloud that kills everything in the general area. And
the Thunderchild just goes straight through the smoke. The aliens aren't expecting it, and they just slice through one of the tripods. Just absolutely obliterate it. And people are just like, fuck yeah! People start cheering and
Another
everything.
one bites the dust.
And then the other tripod's like, oh fuck. They all fire heat beams at once at the ship. And it gets absolutely decimated. It explodes. But with the momentum it's got, it explodes, it flies up, and it destroys another tripod in its death throw as it comes out of the water. Oh, fuck, that's awesome. And also just the name Thunderchild. What a fucking name for a ship. And then, the narrator says, and with that, as the Thunderchild sank to the bottom of the ocean, the last chance for humanity went with it. But the ferry got away.
But the ferry got away. And the people got away. And the thing is, all of this is happening in England.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of left to wonder, is this happening in the rest of the world? Is this going on anywhere else?
That's the thing, it's definitely written by an Englishman, because they briefly mention, like, Berlin and Paris. But, like, if they can defeat England, they've won the whole world. Like... America's.
The other thing is, like, they've I mean, this was at like one of the high points of the British Empire, so it's pride, but it's well deserved pride at that point, because at that point the British had kind of conquered the world. So where were we?
So I think then we can flick back to George's perspective now.
Flick back to George for a sec. Sorry for that brief interruption. Needed a little bit of an, what do I say? I want to say interim. That's not the right word.
A musical break, anyway.
Interlude. I did listen to, just now, interlude. That's the word I'm looking for.
Good job.
Well, anyway, while that was happening, Blue had me listen to one of the songs from the musical version, specifically the musical rendition of the scene we just talked about with the Thunderchild taking on the tripod things, and oh man, I got goosebumps listening to that. That was a really good song, and it's a really good like ballad of the battle. Like that scene.
Yeah, like you look forward to the points when the person's talking because it's telling the story really well. But in the parts where he's not talking, there's like awesome fucking guitar and just. It sounds so good. Great
instrumental, and it's got like an 80s rock ballad kind of sound to it when he's singing about like the Thunderchild on the ship. Anyway, so where we left off, it cuts back to George.
Yes.
And he's now, I believe, made it...
This is days later.
Days later, he makes it into... I thought it was London.
Yeah, he makes it to London.
He makes it to London. And there's devastation all around.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't really see any human beings around. There's bodies, there's buildings destroyed, scorched earth, there's red weed everywhere. And then what he finds, and this is, I think, kind of a brilliant twist to the story, or a brilliant way for this whole thing to resolve. No, I think he's like hiding somewhere, or he's like trying not to. He hears like a moaning or some kind of a loud noise.
He at the beginning of that Thunderchild song, did you? I don't know if you picked up on it. There was a particular part where it went ooh la.
Yeah.
That ooh la is the sound that the fighting machines made to one another. It was their communication.
That's what. Okay, yeah.
And so he heard this song in London, but it. Not that sound in London, but it was different and it was darker, kind of, and it uneased him. And he saw one of these machines standing atop a hill nearby, and there were birds flocking around the top of it.
And I think at one point he just finally breaks, and he's like, you know what? Screw it. I'm not going to be the last man on Earth. If I'm going to go out, I'm going to go out, and he charges the thing.
Yeah, and he's screaming, "Take me!"
Yeah, he's just it's like, fuck you. I'm not going to go out like a bitch. And then he gets to the top of the hill, and the Martians are all dead and dying. And it's then kind of revealed again, because this was written from the perspective of him retrospectively looking back on his experiences, that the Martian environment apparently does not have a plethora of viruses and bacteria and things that, microorganisms.
They removed them.
Yeah, exactly.
Centuries ago.
So they have a very sterile environment, and because of that, when they came down to Earth, they're basically just being killed by diseases that they have no natural immunity to, and they're being wiped out that way.
When man's greatest machines were unable to kill them, the single smallest thing on the planet that God put on the planet, wiped them out. And he says that is the price that humanity has paid in the billions over the years, but it is their claim to Earth.
Yeah, and there's something to be said about that too, because people. Well, I have a lot of philosophizing, a lot of speculation to say at the end of this, but so wrapping up the story, he ends up going into a bit of a fugue state where he just kind of forgets 3 days, and a well-meaning family takes him in and kind of nurses him back to health, and eventually he decides he needs to go back to Woking. And they tell him he shouldn't, because dark memories, and he shouldn't revisit there. He gets there, and his house is of course devastated. He finds a philosophical paper where he was writing, and he had a sentence that was half finished, and as he's leaving his house, who should be there? Oh, he also finds out that Leatherhead was completely destroyed.
Yeah, a lot of the he actually had to, when he was going home, he got to Leatherhead, and they were still building the replacement tracks to his actual village, so he had to walk the path that he did when he originally went from Leatherhead back to Woking.
And so he's basically just thinking,
retracing his steps.
Yeah, he's thinking, my cousin's dead, my wife's dead, no one's around. And then, but when he leaves his house after having looked around, there looking kind of shocked and astonished is his wife and cousin. And I think, and I do want to read that, because he goes through a little bit of speculation at the end about how there could be will the Martians go for future invasions? Have they maybe tried to colonize Venus instead of Earth, finding it a softer target? He speculates as to, will life spread out from the solar system, seeding the rest of the universe from here? And will it be them or us?
He said they had everyone is familiar with the aliens now because they preserved one in the Natural History Museum in London.
Yeah. And they also say, he does imply that they did get land all over the place. I think he says, they rained upon 1,000 cities or something like that.
Oh.
He says that near the end of the book. But the line he says at the end, and I honestly found this to be kind of like a bittersweet moment. It was a good thing, but at the same time it shows that, their lives have been somewhat traumatized. What he says is, "And strangest of all is to hold my wife's hand again, and to think that I have counted her, and that she has counted me, among the dead."
Yep.
And that one line kind of encapsulates everything. They're back together. It's a somewhat happy ending. He's still got his family. They're together again, and they're rebuilding the world, but that trauma is still there. They've both experienced believing the other one was dead, and having sort of come to terms with that mildly. And then found out they were alive again. So I really liked that ending line in the book.
Yeah. Oh. It really sets up well for another, really. It's sad that I don't know if they're... Maybe someone did write another one. I don't know. I'll look it up. They did have a little bit at the end, which I think was set a lot later, where it's a NASA control person. Was that in the book?
That might be in the radio thing. That is not in the book at all.
Okay, so it's just a very short snippet where someone from NASA is saying, we've made our first touchdown on Mars, and then there's some kind of dust storm, and they lose communication, and then the radio operators in the different parts of NASA all lose connection with each other as well, suggesting there is going to be more, or there is more to it, but you just got to imagine it yourself.
And that would have necessarily have to have been added much later than when the book was published, because NASA didn't exist.
Definitely didn't exist.
No, I don't think it existed until the 60s. But yeah, so what I've been kind of sitting on this whole time, and what I think I found fascinating about this whole book, is it almost is a premonition for what actually happened to Europe about 15 years later. It wasn't aliens, but World War One it's a lot of historians refer to it as the time where Europe essentially lost its sense of optimism. Because before World War One and the absolutely devastating loss of human life that happened there, Europe in general, and especially you can see this in the writings of the time and the way the people thought and acted, it was a very much gung-ho, we're we can do anything, we can accomplish anything with science, we can help the world, we can
there's a lot of characters that are just the British Army are on it, alright? Calm down. We're going to go back to having a drink because the British Army are unstoppable.
Yeah. There's this profound sense of confidence and self-assurance. And that's what I found kind of prescient, was at the end of this book, they've lost that to an extent. They've been traumatized by the events and found that they're not the kings of the universe. And ironically, and a bit unfortunately, 15 years later that would happen, and it wouldn't be because of, Martians, it would be because of actual human war.
Yeah.
So that in particular was kind of interesting to me. And also just the way people's attitude. Something I wrote down before we started recording this, I just wanted to get some of my thoughts down, was one, kind of the way things broke down. That happens the same way in this story as it does in a lot of modern disaster movies, but they put less emphasis on it. In this book, I feel because it was in the 1800s, they're a lot closer to kind of, what it's like, the sort of things you need to actually survive.
Yeah.
People were a lot more practical at that time. Nowadays, when you see a disaster movie, it's played up as this really big thing. It's the utilities don't work.
Fucking idiots.
Yeah. Whereas in this, people were a lot more practical. And I think it's telling of the time that people had a lot more practical and world weary is not the word I want to use, but they were a lot more worldly. They understood. Yeah. They understood what you needed to survive. Even this guy who was a philosopher. He wasn't somebody who worked with his hands or anything like that, but he still knew enough to know what he needed to do.
Just a amazing book. I don't know if I would refer people to the original or to the radio version. I think both are phenomenal. But I would certainly read one of them and definitely listen to the album as well.
Yeah, the book.
It's cracking.
The book isn't terribly long. I think the copy I have is just shy of 160 pages, 156 pages. And I also had the audiobook, and that was around...
You could knock it out in a day quite easily.
It was 5.5, 6 hours. I was listening to about a half hour to an hour a night, and then I would also read the physical copy for a little bit if I wasn't in a situation where I could listen to the audiobook. And I got through it in a week. And yeah, you could easily bang it out in a day. And it is quite good. And it is very interesting, especially if you're one of those people who likes, like I do, to see see it like a time capsule. What did people think? What was sci-fi like
And also a very scientific approach thing. Like, they didn't destroy the aliens with nukes, which is every apocalypse story ever these days. That was a really genuinely interesting scientific explanation. And they said the same with, we missed little bits out, but like the red weed started dying because it had the same problem as the aliens. It was getting white patches on it because the bacteria on Earth was not what it was used to, and it was being killed.
Exactly, yeah. He speculated that they had a more sterile environment than the Earth. And that line that you brought up earlier, that was another very good one. It's like, we've paid the price in billions, of humans that have died to disease over the course of the years.
Yeah.
We've gone on quite a long time in this. I think we're clocked in around like an hour and 20 some odd minutes. So, but excellent book. I really enjoyed talking about it, and I think it was worth going on this long about it. Hopefully you guys, anyone listening agrees. I think I may actually publish just this segment as its own separate thing too, just for funsies, because
it was a bit of a media segment, really, wasn't it?
We really did, yeah. It was supposed to be like a quick 40-minute book review, and then we ended up talking for more than an hour. So
yeah,
but it was good. All right, well, this is going to be the end of episode 80 of the TMCJ podcast. Thank you all for listening, and you will hear us again in 2 weeks for episode 81.
Ooh la!